From my point of view, why Berlin emerged into this big tech hub within Germany or Europe is mainly due to talent. You've also seen it now since the war in Russia, Ukraine started. You have a lot of Russians and really skilled Russian developers who actually moved to Berlin, which obviously creates huge opportunities for any startup that wants to build tech solutions.
Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, I did want to take a second to tell you a little bit about our new sponsor, Levity.ai. In freight, time is money and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Whether it's incoming emails from shippers or carriers, Levity's got you covered. It understands any language, any format, and even interprets non-standard formatting. Visit Levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Freight Caviar podcast. We are currently in Berlin, Germany, with Benjamin Noyan, the founder and CEO of rouvia. And the reason why we're here right now sitting and going to have this interview is because yesterday when I was driving from Warsaw to Berlin, I posted an image and tweeted it out. Ted Ailing reached out to me to tell me about a company that Dynamo Ventures has invested in, and he got me connected with Benjamin. So, social media is powerful, got us connected here at this moment. We're going to be talking about Dynamo Ventures and a little bit about why they invested in rouvia. We'll be talking about the freight tech scene that exists here in Berlin and overall in Germany and the EU. And then more about rouvia, the product that Benjamin has built. Benjamin, thank you for taking your time. I know this is last minute, but you came out and I appreciate it. So if you could just maybe give us like a short introduction on who you are.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, great to be here, and I love these kind of coincidences, and it's always good to definitely connect. So great that you have reached out, and I'm glad to be here now. Maybe as a short intro about myself. So Austrian by nature. Moved to Berlin during the COVID times, used to work in management consulting for the logistics industry across different supply chain topics, but always related to basically the container sea freight space. And yeah, at some point I just had enough of the short-term visions that management consulting always pursues, and wanted to actually build a sustainable solution that solves real-time problems within the space. And so at some point I came together with a friend of mine, Fuad, who's our CTO, and we brainstormed and just talked a bit about the industry. And together we have then embarked on the journey of building rouvia with the mission to actually turn the millions of data points that freight forwarders sit on, which are mostly unused today, into actionable insights that drive value for the business or for freight forwarders within the FCL container space.
Okay, so we'll break down rouvia here in a little bit. We'll break it down simply for our audience to understand exactly what the app and technology does. Before we get into that, I do want to bring up Ted Ailing and Dynamo Ventures. You did mention that you moved here during the pandemic. London was like a complete shutdown, and you came here, you decided to move to Berlin. It is like thriving city. There's a big tech scene out here. You met your co-founder here. How did you end up getting an investment from Dynamo Ventures? Can you talk a little about that and maybe your relationship with them?
Yeah, I can't really recall how I got to know Dynamo, but I got an introduction to Ted and the team. And we have been in the middle of our first pre-seed fundraise, and it was actually unexpected, but within almost 3 weeks, we went from first introduction to final investment. I think looking back on the reason why they have invested, I think there are two key components. I think the first one is they quite liked the product and the vision that we followed, Obviously, as logistics experts, they're well aware of the problems that exist in the market. And I think they saw a natural application of what we do. And the second thing, which was quite interesting to us as well when we read through the investment memo, is that they invested predominantly in the people, so into Fuad and myself, where I think they saw that on the one side, it's two young guys, really hardworking, clear vision, and basically it's two people that won't give up no matter how big the obstacles will be. And for us, having gotten them on board was probably one of the best things that we could have actually done, because they bring in a ton of expertise. They know logistics from a lot of different angles. Most of the guys actually come out of logistics, so they also know the problems. Plus, they have a network that actually helps us to really get a competitive advantage by just leveraging the expertise that they have within the people they know.
Mm-hmm. And I know Dynamo has a few companies they've invested in that are based out of Berlin. Santosh was here a few months ago hanging out. I believe it's Sender, and there's maybe a couple more if I'm not mistaken. Can you kind of like talk about the freight tech scene out here in Berlin? Like, who are the companies and what are they up to?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting that you do have a big freight tech scene in Berlin, because you do not have any forwarders, brokers, or logistic companies in Berlin. I think the biggest names definitely Sender, Forto, so Flexport equivalent out of Berlin. You do have Cargo One, Freightos equivalent focused on air freight. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a broker. It's kind of like a marketplace / transport management solution for air freight. And then you have a lot of also smaller, younger startups popping up in the scene, which, I think just due to the nature of the overall tech scene in Berlin, seems reasonable to me. But it's still interesting because you don't have any logistics here.
Yeah, definitely. And I've heard some people say this is like the Silicon Valley of Europe. Berlin is. There are some similarities maybe, like between there's a lot of tech out here. And you get a lot of freight tech companies out in Silicon Valley who also don't have a lot of logistics companies nearby them, mm-hmm. But they have the talent, tech talent. Okay, cool. So
I think that's one of the key points, actually. So from my point of view, why Berlin emerged into this big tech hub within Germany or Europe is mainly due to talent. You've also seen it now since the war in Russia-Ukraine started. You have a lot of Russians and really skilled Russian developers who actually moved to Berlin, which obviously creates huge opportunities for any startup that wants to build tech solutions.
Okay, got it. Interesting. You did mention while we're just having coffee like 30 minutes ago that the intermodal industry in Europe is really fragmented, and it kind of caught like my attention. And I'm kind of curious if you could just touch on that topic a little bit, because and I'm wondering, and I believe so, because there's so many countries in Europe, whereas in America it's like you just one country is so large. Why is it so fragmented in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, if you look back on the history, I think the reason is slightly different. It's mainly an infrastructure topic. Europe, I think almost all countries in Europe, maybe leaving out some countries in Eastern Europe, have heavily invested into public transport infrastructure. And with this, you build out a huge railway network. And it's a bit different, structured-wise, it's a bit different than in the US, because the network for public trains is also used by cargo trains. And with this, it just became a natural alternative to trucking, whereby you have, I would say roughly 120 different railway companies that focus really just on cargo transports, either within certain countries, but also obviously internationally across the European borders.
Okay, got it. And
hey there, amazing listeners. If you're enjoying what you're hearing on our podcast, we need your support. It will only take a moment, but it would mean the world to us. Please make sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share with one of your friends that would enjoy our content. Your engagement helps us reach more people and bring more awesome episodes to you. Thanks a million, and thanks for being part of the podcast community.
now, like getting into rouvia, does that fragmentation at all, like, did you take that into consideration when you were thinking about the application? Because like it is like very fragmented. Does that cause a lot of problems in terms of like data collection or cleaning data? Where like, because I know you brought that up, and I was kind of curious as to why that was brought up in the sense of like, do you think about that often? Like the intermodal industry is fragmented here.
No, I don't think about it often. I think only when we talk in comparison to the US, I think about it, because in the US you have 5-6 railway companies that actually do cargo transports, and here obviously it's a lot more. But with this fragmentation, what you actually get is a data problem, because similar with all of the trucking companies, everybody has their own standards. There's not a unique central data standard that everybody adheres to. Meaning in the end, for customers, freight forwarders, shippers, shipping lines, whoever engages with these road and rail carriers, you have a problem of being able to use the millions of data points that you sit on, because it's completely non-standardized.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's get into the app, the tech that you've built. Can you break it down to us in like very simple terms, and then we'll dig deeper into them. But like, let's just say someone, listening in, most of our audience are freight brokers in the United States, some freight forwarders, predominantly in the United States. What does your app do that could like potentially, if they, help them, or what does it do in the sense of cleaning the data, like simply just right now?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the most important point to understand what we do is to understand that every forwarder, and I'm not sure about brokers, I'm not so much into the detailed processes of how they work, but every forwarder uses a distinct set of road, rail carriers in every country. And for each of these carriers, they've negotiated the tariffs with them. Meaning in the end, as a forwarder, you get tons of Excel spreadsheets and PDF documents or Word documents that contain all of the pricing and tariff data, including surcharges. On top of that, you also have all of the data on empty container picks and drops for your drayage business. And on top of that, you also have your terminal charges that are obviously charged by the terminals itself, being it ports or inland terminals. So you have a lot of data that you sit on, which is completely fragmented. Everybody uses their own standard. And what we do is we have built a solution whereby we can actually read in 95% of all of this data fully automatically into a database. So we parse the data and then harmonize and cleanse it. So what this means in simple terms is nothing else than we take very scattered and unharmonized data and build a red line through it so that we can actually use it to build calculation engines on top that are able to tell you exactly for your drayage transport from A to B, you have these 150 or 200 or 500 transport options, including literally every possibility. And for each option, for your weight class less than 6.5 tons or something, these are the all-in prices, including all the important surcharges. So what it does in the end, what it helps forwarders to do is we can tell you with the solution who are the different providers across the different modes of transport, across the different regional specificities like depots, terminals, and so on. We can tell you what is the price that you're going to pay for this transport even before you procure or quote on it. So in a sense, we turn the industry a bit from being very experience and relationship driven to being data driven and thereby cost optimizing both selling as well as buying decisions. So what we see often, just to give you an idea there, for single transport, for example, from the port of Hamburg in Germany to the south of Germany, Munich, you can buy a transport with a carrier for 650 euros or for 1,500 euros and everything in between. So you have a super long list really of different options, each having a huge gap of pricing to basically the next carrier or the next transport option. And today, a dispatcher or also somebody working in sales, they don't know about all the options they have. Because for single transport, you would need to consider at least 5.5 million data points, which is, I mean, no human person is ever able to do that.
What do you mean by that? You said 5.5 million data points for what exactly?
To just calculate through all of the different options you have on like, single transport.
Like, but you're taking into account like the road, rail, barge, like all that into account for that?
Yeah, plus then the different depots.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have in Europe, and I'm pretty sure it's the same in the US, you have your inland, no, it's actually not the same in the US. In Europe, you have inland depots. So around the city of Munich, you will have 8 different inland depots. And depending also on which ocean carrier you've been using, you obviously need to drop off that empty container in one of these depots. And the pricing may differentiate from 0 to 300 euros for just dropping that container. So the decision about what depot to use makes also quite a large impact on pricing. But nobody today is able, like not a human person is able to actually calculate all of these options in their head and make a cost optimized decision. There's some companies that try to solve this with huge Excel sheets that basically just collect a bit of information, but you never get to the accuracy that we can get to with just using a combination of AI and advanced pricing algorithms.
Do you think there's more data points in the EU because of like various, maybe like ways of hauling transport, or like you said, like the depots in Munich? Like, are there more data points here in Europe compared to other parts of the world, or is it kind of scattered across the world kind of evenly?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it might even be less. So I don't have an exact answer to that, because I today we're not really active in the US. It's something that's definitely planned for the future. Because also drayage there is, I think, still in many cases a problem unsolved. And there's a lot to optimize there. But I think from my first, like what I would expect is that you have more data in the US because your carrier landscape is much more scattered than it is actually in Europe. I mean, Europe you have, on the trucking side at least, you usually have large trucking carriers with a big fleet of trucks. And obviously, for this carrier, you will have only one rate sheet. Versus in the US, if you have a very scattered landscape, you will have a lot more rate sheets that you have to use when considering taking carrier A, B, or C.
Got it. I find it like interesting. I'm trying to like dig a little bit deeper because I'm not a tech person. My co-founder is, he's a technical partner. But so you're parsing data, and like to our audience, of freight forwarders, freight brokers who aren't also as technical, you did say that you're pulling all this data, and this data is from, like, let's say your customer provides you the data, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you did mention some metrics like who the carrier is, what kind of rate it will be. That's like, can you tell us a little bit about like what metrics are like of the most important? Like let's just say like you get like all this data from your customer. What are you actually like going to tell them? You're going to tell them like which carriers to use, what the price they should expect to pay or will be paying in the near future, and like are there like other metrics as well?
I think the key thing here, so the key thing to understand is what we do. So we get all of this data from the forwarders. They send us just raw Excel sheets, raw PDF files. And we take care of the entire data management for them. They can also do it themselves if they want to. So we have the option where basically they just can manage their own data. But we always recommend them give it to us because data input directly correlates with your data output. So it's important to have 100% accuracy within your data input. And this data just builds the foundation now for the applications that we have built on top. And today there are two main parts. The core thing is basically your buying optimization. What this means is nothing else. It's basically a tool where somebody, a dispatcher or somebody who does transport planning, actually logs in, types in all the details for container transport. And within less than a second, he will get a full table, a list with all the different transport options he have, listing the different carriers that are being used, listing the different depots and so on and so forth. So you get full transparency across all different options that rouvia has calculated for you. And with every option, you get the all-in price. So that's pricing from including your base rates, surcharges, depot costs, terminal costs, and customers can also add additional costs if they want to. So if there are additional line items that they want to add, they can do that themselves. And this is basically the key thing. Based on this information, the dispatcher can make a decision about which carrier, which depot, which terminal, which route to use for this transport. At the same time, he also directly sees the internal selling price for this transport, because we have the second side, which is the sales side. So the second interface for salespeople or whoever takes care of quotation to customers, whereby they see a simplified version of what the buying side says. And they don't see buying prices, but they see internal selling prices. So it's basically buying price plus normally a certain security margin that you want to put on top. And then, you can also define certain additional margins you want to put on top, accrual margin and so on and so forth. And the salesperson, normally, you can also type in transport A to B and then sees one price. And depending on how the organization is set up, they can also directly create an offer out of this quote. Or we can also have an integration into a global quotation tool where then this quote is being pushed basically into a global quotation tool, can be then merged with the sea freight rates, and you have an all-in rate. And the nice thing about the sales side of the sales view basically is that you have globally the same data set. So you can implement rouvia across your entire global setup from China to Brazil. You can basically thereby enable your Chinese colleagues who are organizing a transport from Shenzhen to Munich to directly also view the internal selling price for that drayage business in Europe. Because normally what he has to do is he goes to his counterpart in Germany. The German sales manager goes to the buying team to request a quote, and then it goes all the way back. It's a long communication chain.
Definitely.
And what we do is just we remove all of this.
You kind of connect it all in a way, and then you provide one price that's for seamless transport from A to B, without having all the intermediaries in between. Adding. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then so the third part we're working on right now is then the cost control part. So basically what it means is if you then get an invoice from your carrier, so from your road or barge or rail carrier, then what the tool does, it automatically compares the line items or the invoiced amount to what the amount actually should be. Because what we found in basically a review with two of our customers is that on average invoices are by more than 50 euros too high. So they're incorrect by more than 50 euros. And what the tool will do, because it's currently in development, is it will directly compare. So we'll take the invoice, PDF invoice, read it in, compare the data, and flag to the accounting team if there is a mismatch of more than a certain threshold that the customer can set themselves. And thereby you can actually then kick off the claims process, and you can make sure that wrong invoices are not being paid. So a lot of forwarders today have huge teams sitting in satellite offices somewhere in Eastern Europe or in Asia, just comparing invoices to what they should be. You just have a system that does it for you.
Yep, definitely. Love it. Okay, you did bring this up earlier, Benjamin, that you're moving the industry from being relationship-driven to more data-driven. And I'm kind of curious, is that like, before you answer that, I'm kind of curious, like, do you see the evolution of the industry like actually moving towards that way? Like, is there, because we'll be data-driven, there would be less need for like forwarders and intermediaries, right? Because they just kind of be connecting everything together. Go ahead. You want to say something?
Yeah. So, I think that's an important point, which is I don't think that we go from relationship-driven to data-driven, because I think one can exist in parallel to the other. I think relationships are still the key in the industry, and I think they're highly important, because in the end, purely just working on data is not going to solve all problems for you. So what we do in our solution, for example, is on certain trade lanes, you can build logic into the solution. That on certain trade lanes, you have preferred carriers that you're using because you have strong relationships to them, because you have trust into their service, and quality is key.
Yeah.
And I think what still remains hugely important is to have really close relationships with your partners. Mm-hmm. Now, the only thing we do is when it then comes to making decisions on a daily basis for all of your employees, whereby everybody has their own relationships, we just bring in transparency and basically the data perspective that will help you to optimize your decision. Mm-hmm. Because also I think the key thing on the buying side, for example, is you get this long list of options with prices, but just because there's somebody's the cheapest doesn't mean that you also can buy the cheapest. Mm-hmm. It's like a capacity issue that you will have, because everybody wants the cheapest.
Sure.
But what it does, it actually tells you exactly, hey, this is your internal sales margin. So if you can basically buy out of the cheapest to the sixth cheapest, and you still make a good margin on this transport. Yeah. And obviously, if your close relationship is in there, where you know that you will get capacity because you have this relationship, then go for it. Okay. It's really just about giving you now the means to make to take better decisions.
Yeah, definitely. It's not like making it relationship driven, but you're taking into account all the data to make a smarter decision.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious in terms of like what your thoughts are in like the future of like freight tech and overall the landscape that we're in. Do you see a future, I'm not sure, maybe like not in the next maybe 10, 20 years, but like eventually do you see a future where like potentially forwarders might not exist due to technology? Or are you more on the side that they'll be more efficient due to technology, but they'll still be there, they'll still be necessary?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's actually one where I used to have a lot of conversations with venture capital funds. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, in the end, if you're talking plain vanilla container transports, so nothing too complex, no special goods, no huge complexity, then what the freight forwarder does for the shipper is just removing the complexity that they can't handle internally. Mm-hmm. Now, to your question, what will the future look like is tech is doing the same thing in the end, right? Tech helps you to remove complexity in a landscape where today there's a lot of complexity. And for shippers, logistics is not their core business, so usually it entails complexity. And I think as a result, cutting it short now, I don't think freight forwarders will not exist, but they will be more specialized. I think freight forwarders will need to increase specialization in certain industries because the plain vanilla business will move more directly between shipper and carrier relationships. Okay. Is at least what I think where this will move to.
I like that. Okay, so you didn't mention there's 3 parts to rouvia, right? And well, you're just working on the third part, which is the invoice reconciliation tool right now. What's next after that? Because I'm guessing this is just like a roadmap where you had the part 1, which was kind of like you had the proof of concept with your probably your first customer, and then you built on top of that. You got investments. Then you built the second part, and part 3 you mentioned was the invoice reconciliation. Can you talk a little bit about where do you see the application building on from there?
Yeah. So I think for us, the natural next step is then going into the booking or procurement process itself. I think, let me take it differently. I think there are 2 parts that we currently look at. One is going directly into the booking procurement process and enabling forwarders to basically partially automate this process. Why? Because we have all the data. So you know there's a transport A to B. We have calculated the all-in prices for every single option. We know exactly who are the carriers, what's the depot, and so on and so forth. So naturally, we can just basically add a very simple, for the user, a very simple tool where with a single click, you can then basically procure this transport. You will have to provide a bit of information, documents, and so on. But with a single click, then you can actually do the entire booking and procurement process. And the tool can basically decide itself based on logic, go with option 1. If option 1 doesn't have capacity, go with option 2. If it doesn't have capacity, go with option 3. So the user doesn't have to request for different carriers, hey, do you have capacity, yes or no? The tool can do it themselves, and it's just kind of like an AI-based or large language model-based email bot that does it in the background. So I think that's one of the things we currently look at, which is something we dive deeper into for the future. And the second point is adding sea freight to it, because obviously drayage is always the first and last part of transport, but you have the ocean transport, and there's at least not a tool that I am aware of that I've seen within optimization of the holistic container supply chain. And if you want to really optimize the entire thing, you need to look at it holistically, because your decisions about which carrier you use on the ocean side has a direct impact on your cost base for your first and last mile. So that's one part that we also look at currently, adding sea freight and being able to do basically the global container quotation or tariff management.
Okay.
So optimizing basically decision end to end.
Got it. Love it. Is there anything else that you'd want to talk about or bring up, or anything that you'd want to maybe tell us about? Just curious. I know we're running a little bit low on time. We have a couple minutes, so we just got to wrap it up. Is there anything you did say that you wanted to get into, learn more about the U.S. drayage market?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, I think this is something, and maybe it now also loops a bit back to the Dynamo guys, because yesterday we had the board meeting with them, and one of the guys actually came here to Berlin. Unfortunately, he already left yesterday. Otherwise, we could have taken him today as well. But we talked about this, that in the end, the Dynamo guys are still looking basically for a drayage startup in the US, somebody who pushes forward that market, which is a niche in a sense, but it's a huge niche.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite an interesting aspect, because for me, I just know, the basic things I know is, and I understand the market works differently in the States than it does in Europe. From the structure, from the value chains, and from the players that are actually involved in organizing and conducting drayage transport. So I think one of the key things is for us, as we in the future will also work together with businesses that have offices in the US, is to understand also how the market actually works. How does it all fit together? Who are the key players you need to basically involve and integrate there in order to enable the same level of optimization that you have in Europe. And I think here our value prop is very clear. It's basically, in Europe at least, or also in Asia, it's very clear. We can help you save $130 for every drayage transport. or up to $130. Always depends, obviously, on the transport itself and on your status quo processes. But that's what we have proven even with one of the digital freight forwarders. Now, I think one of the key things is to understand what is the level of value we can create for a US business. And that's something I'm not very clear about yet because I do not understand the market enough.
Sure. So you need a drayage expert in the United States to help you out.
Yes.
All right. So if there's any expert in drayage in the US, reach out to Benjamin. How should they contact you? Let's just say someone is listening and they want to help you out.
Yeah, I think the easiest would be either directly via LinkedIn or also via email is obviously possible. So I'm not sure, we can probably add this.
Yeah, we could add it. Yeah, we'll make sure to add the email here. Benjamin, I know you got to run. You have another meeting here shortly. Thank you so much for just taking your time to meet us and hang out for a little bit. This was great. And I know you're going to Chattanooga in May. So I hope Ted takes you on the bus tour out there and shows you around. Chattanooga is a special place in America, especially in the freight scene. So that's awesome. But yeah, thanks again for coming and stopping by and hanging out with us for a little bit.
I love it. It was my pleasure. Also my pleasure meeting you. And I hope that we can talk again in the future.
Definitely.
Hey, thank you.
Benjamin. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Freight Caviar podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, or if you didn't, leave a review. Let me know what you think. I appreciate any feedback. If you'd like to have more Freight Caviar content, go to freightcaviar.com and subscribe to my email newsletter.